Welcome to Drinking Bros, presented by GhostBed.com. Welcome to Drinkin' Bros, kids. For a while now, we've been saying that we're going to have a crypto expert on the show because we're all in.
We had a stonks.
We're all in.
We had a stonks guy, and he said we asked him at the top of the show, like, we would appreciate it if you would only use the word stonks.
Stonks.
And he did for the entire show.
He did, or he was going to have to leave the show.
Unfortunately, there's no cool nickname for crypto. So
not yet.
We're just going to have to use regular words.
I like Crip a lot, but apparently it's named after a gang.
Yeah,
so
it's taken, yeah.
We will get into it today. Finally, we got a crypto messiah on the show, Anthony Pompliano. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You got it right. That was great. Only took you 6 tries.
I want 1 Bitcoin then. I will take 1 Bitcoin for that, sir. Thank you. Look, let's start from the top here. How did you get into it, and what year, most importantly, did you get into crypto?
Yeah, second half of 2016. And frankly, I thought I missed the entire thing. I'd heard about it 2 years before when I was working at Facebook, completely wrote it off, didn't even Google it. And I actually wasn't interested, didn't get pitched on kind of the Bitcoin as an asset, or, a lot of, I think, kind of how people think about it today. Basically, somebody pitched me on the idea of just building mining facilities. And they were like, hey, man, it's like data centers, but better. And I was like, cool, cash flow, awesome. And you get paid back in less than 12 months? Yep. All right, let's do that. That sounds amazing. And so that's how I got started. And then as you just kind of go down the rabbit hole, if you will, very quickly, it's like, why am I focused on anything else? Why am I not just doing this stuff? And then here we are a couple years later.
Yeah, because look, a lot of people were asking why Jack Dorsey stepped down from Twitter. And you will be able to confirm this, not me probably, but everybody said he was so far into crypto and Bitcoin and everything else, and he thinks that's the future, that he just literally wanted out of Twitter because it was a huge responsibility and time consuming. Is that true, and is it really the future in your opinion?
So I can't speak for Jack. I don't know why he stepped down. What I will say is, from my personal opinion, who the hell wants to be the CEO of Twitter that has to deal with kind of a situation where there's no right answer? No matter what you do and what decisions you make, you're wrong in some way. So if you censor too much, you're wrong. If you don't censor enough, then you're wrong, right? And ultimately, it's not because it's actually right or wrong. It's just that people have a perspective on the world, and you end up in the political world. And there's nothing worse than kind of the political world, in my opinion. So I think that's a big thing of just like, if you're the CEO of Twitter, like, you probably want to run away from a lot of that nonsense and just go focus on things that are more meaningful. And then when it comes to Bitcoin, look, I think Jack, from what he's at least said publicly, I think he truly believes that Bitcoin is the single most important technology in the world right now. And, we'll get into it, but it's really just, if you boil down the root cause of many, many problems in our society, both domestically and internationally, it comes down to fiat currencies. It's just the debasement of a currency. And that changes the way you think. It changes the actions you have. And so if you can fix that problem, it falls back on this idea of like, fix the money, fix the world, which, is a cute kind of tagline, if you will, for Twitter, but I think it has truth to it as well.
I think you're supposed to save the cheerleader, actually, to save the world.
Yeah, that or Matt Damon says
fucking heroes. Man,
fortune favors the brave.
It's actually fortune favors the bold, and it's the slogan of the Special Air Service in England. He totally fucked it up. God damn it, man.
Somebody owned the trademark, I'm convinced. Because I looked at my wife and I was like, wait a minute, did you say brave instead of bold? It's bold, right?
No.
Matt Damon's been getting killed for it. That's a Crypto.com commercial that he's doing it for. He had to have a stock or something in that, right?
I mean, I don't know what they paid him. I don't know how he got compensated, but I'm sure that guy doesn't work for free. So I can only imagine that it was a pretty nice payday for him.
Yeah, but now that Matt Damon's doing it, does it make it cool is the question. Since he started doing those commercials,
I mean, there's
been
Damon
a mini crash.
Is he a trendsetter? I don't really see Matt Damon as a trend. He's a great actor.
Great actor.
But not a trendsetter.
No,
right?
no.
Like, people aren't walking around with that shitty haircut he's got.
No, I think the way to think about this is like, look, and this will be a theme throughout the conversation. It's just like, I don't think people outside of the industry understand how big these companies are, how big their marketing budgets are, how wealthy some of the folks have gotten. And so if you just look at, let's take the corporation's marketing budgets, FTX literally has gone out and done all sorts of things. They bought the rights to the arena in Miami. They've been able to go out and secure a number of other rights, everything from esports to kind of more traditional stuff, Coinbase, NBA partnership.
Hold on, I want to interrupt you right there. When you say these companies, you're specifically meaning crypto exchanges, correctly? Like Crypto.com, like Coinbase, like all these other things. Can you explain how that's different than an individual coin specifically? Because I think people get that quite a bit confused and understand that a lot of these exchanges have their own coin and the utility of that itself as well.
Yeah, so basically think of it as in the crypto industry, there are companies just like you would normally have, right? There's a CEO or a founder. They have an executive team. They hire employees. They work at a real office. There's equity and cash in the way that they're compensated. And there's no coin. There's no, kind of tokens. There's none of that. So if you think of Coinbase, Gemini, BlockFi, Kraken, those are the companies that you probably heard of if you're paying attention to crypto. But these are just normal centralized kind of traditional companies. And so no different than the New York Stock Exchange, these companies are exchanges, right? They basically allow for buyers and sellers to come and buy and sell tokens on their product, but they themselves don't have a token. Then there are exchanges that have been built that kind of have a hybrid. So what they basically do is Binance and FTX are probably the two best examples. These are the two largest kind of globally, where there's a company, but they also launch a token as well. And if you hold the token, maybe you get some preferential treatment. So you may get lower fees or you may get some other benefit from holding that token when you use their product. But there's still a company. There's still a CEO. There's still kind of revenue on a balance sheet, and there's still, kind of salaried employees, et cetera. So if you think there's like centralized traditional companies, then you have this like hybrid of equity plus a token. And then the last one is you get these decentralized exchanges. And I think this is where people start to kind of like, what the hell is going on? A decentralized exchange is literally somebody wrote software code. There's no traditional company that runs it or kind of maintains it. And you can just show up to a website and you can transact on that exchange. And essentially they've built automated software to match the buyers and sellers. And so like that would be the holy grail of a lot of Wall Street traders. It's just that, of course, the centralized companies in the traditional financial system don't want that. And so what we're really watching here is, like I always say, it's like the technologists are assaulting Wall Street and the technologists are winning. And that's not necessarily a new trend either. Like, you guys are probably around the same age as me. Like when I was a kid, it was all just guys in suits and ties, slick back hair, with cologne and a Rolex on trying to pick stocks. Mm-hmm. And that was in like, the early 90s into maybe like the 99 kind of stock boom and bust. Now, like if you're that guy who literally looks like you're, Gordon Gekko, you're getting crushed on Wall Street because you're trading against a computer. Yeah, and the computer made 1,000 trades before you click the button. And so I think that like the automation and the technology has already taken hold on Wall Street. Now what you have is just people showing up saying, look, I don't want to optimize locally for small kind of fractions of a penny on every trade. What we're going to do is we're going to build a whole new financial system that actually isn't dependent on the legacy incumbents. And, there's a lot of people who are excited about that. Frankly, there's a lot of people who they don't like that idea. And that's, I think, what you're seeing in the debate.
So can you go ahead and say some pros and cons for centralized exchanges versus decentralized exchanges for some of the protection aspects of it, and then just go into that?
Yeah, and I'll tell you my personal experience with it, because I got into crypto, full disclosure, about a year ago with the dummies that you hear behind us here are checking their phones every 10 seconds about crypto and seeing what happens. That's become the new thing of like, whenever you see somebody scrolling out, they're not looking at Tinder anymore. It's literally, they're just updating their crypto accounts, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. I get it. So finally, they had talked me into it during that crash, but under my own like safe investigation that I did for me, myself, of not wanting to get ripped off, because I didn't want to look into a screen and take a picture of myself and then send all my information to China. Coinbase was the one that I trusted the most, right? Where I was like, this seems like Merrill Edge, like something I have for stocks and everything else. And so I got in when it was low, and then, it's done pretty well. It had a mini crash soon. Is that part of it and what he's talking about?
So centralized exchanges, Coinbase is probably the leading American brand when it comes to centralized exchanges. And it's important to call out, like, what is centralization and decentralization? These are just big fucking words that people use that sound smart, but like most people are like, what does that mean? And ultimately, centralization is not good or bad, and decentralization isn't good or bad. They just have different things they're optimizing for. So take Amazon, for example. Amazon is a centralized company. That means that there is a small group of people in the executive team that they have control of that business. They make the decisions. It's hierarchical in structure. And ultimately, if you work at Amazon, you are executing the strategies that are set by that centralized hierarchical kind of leadership team. And the reason why they do that is because they are pursuing efficiency. The whole point of the Amazon business is become more efficient. So if I can get you something faster and cheaper, I win, right? I'm providing a better customer service. So in order to get efficiency, you need a very, very centralized entity. And if you think of most businesses, they want efficiency, right? They use synergy and like all this shit, but like ultimately they just need efficiency. And that comes from centralization. Decentralization says, I don't need efficiency. What I need is I need the most resilience or the most security in the world. And the reason why that becomes important is remember, you guys probably remember, what's his name? Sean Parker, when they did Napster. Remember the music filing stuff? Yep. Like, awesome idea, right? We were all trading around songs. You go download anything. We all thought we were kings of the internet, right? But ultimately it got shut down. Why did it get shut down? Even though it was peer-to-peer, meaning that I could post a file and you could download it, and we didn't actually need somebody in the middle to like verify it or to allow us to do that. There was still a centralized company with centralized servers that the music industry went after and governments went after, and they shut it down. And so ultimately, even though that business was peer-to-peer, it wasn't truly decentralized. And so now what people have learned is if you want to build something that can withstand external shock, everything all the way up to a nation state literally coming and trying to shut it down, it has to be decentralized. So if the United States said, hey, Jeff Bezos, you're an idiot, you screwed up Amazon, antitrust legislation comes out, they can break him up. He's centralized. They can put Jeff Bezos in jail. They can fine him. They can break up the business. In the decentralized world, there is nobody to call in front of Congress. Like Congress called Mark Zuckerberg and Bezos and all these guys in front of Congress. Nobody knows who the hell Satoshi Nakamoto is for Bitcoin. There's no CEO to go knock on their door. There's no headquarters to go visit. It's decentralized. And even if you shut down every computer in the United States, there's still millions of computers running the software globally.
Right.
And even if every government said, yo, we're going to work together, we're going to shut this shit down, they still won't be able to do it because you can run it in your home. And so that decentralization, it's not the most efficient, but it is the most secure. And so if you're building something, you got to ask yourself, do I want efficiency over security?
Right.
Or do I want security over efficiency? And that's where you get the difference.
It's secure upstream, but downstream, now we're talking about taxing unrealized gains for the first time in American history, which is the fucking dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. But now we're on this fucking border. We were talking about it last week, actually. We're on this border where it isn't technically an unrealized gain at this point because you can get a fucking debit card and spend directly out of your crypto account. Now, I know there are some mechanics that happen behind the scenes that technically make it a transition just in that moment from an unrealized gain to a realized gain and only for that amount. But that is an effective realized gain at that point if you could spend it at will. That's at least how the Treasury will see it, right?
Here's the best thing that I can say about the unrealized gain stuff. They should do it. And then they're going to have to answer to every American that owns a house because their houses just went up 20% over the last 12 months. And there's no way that the average American could pay the taxes on a 20% gain on the equity of their home. Yeah. And so therefore they literally all have to go sell their homes to be able to pay the fucking taxes. Well, like it's stupid.
That's kind of
it'll never get passed because it's literally impossible for them to actually operationalize it. But to your point, there is an immense overhang of taxation on the crypto industry. And despite that it's actually taxed more, they still have over 100 million people have gone and used this. There's been almost $2.5 trillion of market cap created over the last decade or so. And so it's obvious that people want this stuff. They're willing to succumb to the taxation, even though it's worse, because this stuff's valuable to them. And I think that ultimately politicians will capitulate and they'll have to treat it differently.
Yeah, it's valuable in a way, in a dichotomous way that we haven't seen much be valuable since, we started using paper currency. I mean, we're not breaking little bits off a piece of gold anymore and handing to each other.
I wish we were.
I mean, it'd be fucking funny as shit.
Awesome, dude.
Like, here we go. You're fucking spit tobacco.
Go to Subway, give me that 6-inch tuna, and here's 2 bits, sir.
Yeah, but I mean, it's it has been the case that something is either a stock security, or equity in something or whatever, or it's liquid. I mean, it's liquid or illiquid currency, and this is a bit of both. From your perspective, what exactly is cryptocurrency? Because it's more than just a currency. It's more than just a stock. It's just because of the tech behind it and the decentralized nature. How should people look at it? Like how the individual that owns it, how should I view that piece of wealth or whatever the fuck?
So let me talk about from the framework of in the legacy financial world. There's 4 different assets that you can own. Right? You can own basically stocks, bonds, currencies, or commodities. And different assets go into each one of those buckets, but ultimately that's what you can own. And Bitcoin is not trying to be a stock. It's not trying to be a bond. It's not trying to be a commodity. It's trying to be a currency, right? A digital currency. And so what does a currency mean for Bitcoin specifically? It means that it's got to be a store of value, a medium of exchange, and a unit of account. And I think that if you rank those 3 things today, like Bitcoin has been a very successful store of value. If you've bought it and held it for a long period of time, it's not only protected your purchasing power, but it's increased at a pretty significant rate. It's like, okay, check the box. As a medium of exchange, historically, it was like an okay medium of exchange, but it was super volatile to US dollar price points. That scared people away. Now we got the Lightning Network, a few other things, and so it's getting better. But like the evolution of technology is store of value, then medium of exchange. Ultimately, I think the Bitcoin community, the aspiration, and what I think a lot of people have deep conviction in, is that it will become a unit of account. Meaning that when you go to a store, they're not going to be like, "Yo, that's $2." They're going to be like, "That's 20,000 satoshis." And you're going to start to think in terms of Bitcoin rather than in dollars.
So they want to compete with the dollar.
It's not necessarily compete, because here's where I think a lot of people forget is that the dollar itself is a really bad store of value. Like if you've held the dollar over a decade, you lose a double-digit percentage of your purchasing power. Right. And if you held the dollar, like if you had 100% of your wealth in cash over the last 24 months, like you're an idiot, right? Because you just literally, inflation just ate away at all of your purchasing power and compared to other assets. So take like real estate. Real estate's up 20% in the last 12 months. So if you were holding cash, you now need 20% more dollars in order to buy the same piece of real estate you needed to buy last year.
Right.
If you then compare that to the stock market, to buy the same amount of the stock market in the S&P 500, you need 30% more dollars. So the dollar value is going down while asset prices are going up.
That's the time value of money, though, right? Like people don't know. That's something that I never heard of until I was in like grad school or some shit. We were doing, we were talking about homeland security and currency. Protecting currency from existential threats. You know what I mean? It had nothing to do with actual economics. But people don't understand that, like letting the government keep your money in escrow essentially all year and then getting a tax refund. Sure, it's nice then, but that whatever amount you get, $2,000 or whatever, if you had invested that $2,000 in literally anything, it would be worth more now and probably safe from inflation, right? So, Giorgio, what are you talking about?
Well, he brought up a couple really interesting things. One, he brought up the sense of using Bitcoin as a currency, and I wanted to bring up some things for Bitcoin specifically, and then the speed of the transaction verification and the cost of doing a transaction. He also brought up a thing very quickly called the Lightning Network, which is where it will make a ledger of transactions outside of the Bitcoin network, bring it back to the Bitcoin network in a way to alleviate this high cost per transaction and this slow transaction time when trying to utilize it and making it.
But isn't that kind of an affront to the idea of decentralization if it has to pipe information offline outside of the blockchain?
Well, right now, I think this is, I don't know if you'd agree with me, Bitcoin is not the most efficient cryptocurrency in a way that you're trying to use it as a currency. It isn't as effective as other coins and tokens out there.
The way to think about this is, so the architecture of the Bitcoin network in a very generalized way is every 10 minutes, all the transactions that happen in the world get batched together and then they get essentially validated, right? And validated means like they get cleared through. Yeah. And when that occurs, ultimately, if you go to do a transaction, let's say I go to send Bitcoin to one of you and I got to wait 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on how many block validations, then that's not, quote unquote, fast. Right. And then also, if there's tons and tons of people around the world that are all trying to get their transactions done in that 10-minute time frame, then the fees go up. Right. There's a finite amount of space for the transactions. And so people are competing. So fees go up when it's more popular. Ultimately, what layer twos do, which the Lightning Network is a layer two, is it provides relief. Now, hold that thought for a second, because the historical context here is really important. You guys were joking about using gold, but it's actually a really, really good example. People used gold as a store of value for thousands of years, but it sucked as a currency. Like if you walk in and you're like, hey man, let me shave off some gold. Let me show you how much gold I have. You can kind of eyeball what's it worth, right? Like that's hard to do. Yeah. And so ultimately what they decided was like, damn, if we want to make this a better medium of exchange, like an actual currency to use for transactions, we have to create a second layer. So layer one was the physical gold, right? That actual bullion. The second layer was dollar claims on the gold, so paper claims. And so that whole idea was like, yo, don't carry around your gold anymore. Leave the gold in the bank or in a vault. Now you have a piece of paper that says, hey, I own this much gold, and we're going to trade the paper around. And so if I handed the paper to one of you all and you wanted the gold, you'd go to the bank and say, hey, give me the gold. Here's my paper claim to it. But that paper was layer two. It made it easier to transact. It made it cheaper. It made it faster, et cetera. And then eventually we built other layers, right? We built electronic money and credit and all this stuff on top of it. With Bitcoin, the Bitcoin kind of capital B that everyone always talks about is talking about layer one. That is a decentralized computer network. It's the strongest computer network in the world. It's the most secure computer network in the world. But it is 10-minute block times. And so ultimately you get congestion on a network that is so popular. And so the layer two got built similar to the paper claims, only this isn't necessarily paper claims. It is Bitcoin being sent peer-to-peer. And then after you send the peer-to-peer transactions, they get validated when you close these channels. And so without getting into like all the computational architecture and all kind of like the more nerdy stuff, just think of it as gold was a great store of value. Layer two, the paper claims, made it a really good medium of exchange. Bitcoin layer one, great store of value. Bitcoin layer two is now making it a good medium of exchange, to the point where Twitter decided that they were going to allow their users to send Bitcoin back and forth on that layer two using the Lightning Network. El Salvador, an entire country, onboarded their citizens to the Lightning Network. So it's got to the point now where like you can really use this stuff in a pretty material way. And the beauty of it is twofold. One, if I wanted to send one of you all a penny right now, it's nearly impossible for me to send you a penny. I'm not going to put a penny in the mail, right? I also, if I go to my bank, I'm like, yo, wire one of them a penny. They're not going to let me do it, right? There's kind of minimums to spend, et cetera. With Bitcoin, I can literally send you a penny's worth of Bitcoin instantaneously, completely for free across the Lightning Network. Now, how many times in your life do you want to send a penny? Almost never. But where it becomes interesting is you can actually do things like streaming payments. So one example is that right now you guys could set it up so that people who are watching or listening to the podcast can literally stream you Bitcoin while they're listening. So they could send you a penny every minute they listen. And if only one person does it, it's not that huge financial gain that you have. But if you have hundreds of thousands of listeners all streaming you Bitcoin at the same time as a thank you, kind of paying you for your service, then that adds up over time.
But the big caveat with the Lightning is you have to deposit your Bitcoin in the Lightning Network to spend it on the Lightning Network before you do anything with it. So it can't be in the same pool of Bitcoin, either on a centralized exchange or in a wallet that you have. You have to basically say, I'm going to spend this much money on the Lightning Network. Let me move it there first, beforehand, almost like a preloaded debit card.
To a degree, basically where we're moving to, and you're starting to see this a little bit, it's like Square just added support for the Lightning Network. So you can actually have your Bitcoin, let's say on Square, and then you can send it across the Lightning Network because they support it. But to your point, historically, there's been very few of these kind of more centralized accounts that have actually supported Lightning. That's now changing. And I think eventually we'll get to the point where the default or the standard is they all support it. But really all that does is it just allows you to spend your Bitcoin or send it to anyone very fast, very cheap, and it does it in a way that can't be replicated in the legacy financial system. The other thing to remember here is that like we all are the assholes of the financial system, right? We all live in the United States. The dollar is like the best of the worst fiat currencies. If I want to go get $100 out of the ATM, I walk up to the ATM, I punch it in, it always works. If I'm not worried about my bank seizing my money, my credit card and my debit card work whenever I want. And the purchasing power of the dollar is like pretty good. But that's only true for the 330 million Americans that live in the United States. You go to Venezuela, Zimbabwe, Turkey right now, like these places are getting ravaged by really dire financial situations. And so ultimately, in some way, being an American is actually a disadvantage in understanding this problem because we have so much privilege or we're so fortunate to live in what is the greatest country in the world with one of the best financial, if not the best financial system in the world. But in these other countries in South America, Central America, people see this shit and they're like, duh, this is like a no-brainer. My country literally lost 50% of its value in Argentina in its currency last year. Like, I'm not holding that shit. I'd rather hold this thing that no one can debase, and it's a no-brainer for that population.
And because of what you just said, I think that's why a lot of Americans are skeptical about getting into crypto, where they're like, look, if I lose my money in a bank, at a Bank of America or Wells Fargo or whatever, it is insured. With Bitcoin, like you were saying earlier at the top of the show, we don't even know who fucking invented this goddamn thing. Like, there's a guess of this guy, but we don't really have any confirmation of that. Everything that you just said with our producer Giorgio back and forth might as well have been in Braille to me because I didn't understand it. Therefore, me trying to explain that to either friends or family members about why you should get into Bitcoin and crypto and everything else makes me seem like a fucking lunatic. All I know is this. I went with the most trusted thing that I could, which was Coinbase, because that seemed closest to like an account that I had dealt with that was real, where I could switch money back and forth from my accounts to my actual physical bank account that I could go to the ATM and get hundreds of dollars out for strippers or cocaine or booze or whatever Dan and I do on the weekend. Right. But the bigger part of this is now you have 50,000 fucking coins on these apps that you're going to that you have no idea if they're real, if they're not real, if they're going to drop. There was a class action lawsuit, 2 or 3 days ago against Kim Kardashian and all them for Ethereum Pro, which is not the same as Ethereum, for this coin that was supposed to be the next biggest thing on the face of the planet and then dropped 97%, and now they're all getting sued for it. What do we trust other than, because right now, again, full disclosure, I have Bitcoin and I have Ethereum. Those are the only two that I really trust. I didn't get into Dogecoin or Litecoin or whatever the fuck, what was the Let's Go Brandon coin that just dropped? Well, I didn't get any of that.
Well, I don't want to interrupt you, but like those meme coins and those coins that you can create over anything, and the way this is the wild, wild west still is like it opens it up for like scammers, and like they can name their coin whatever they want. So they named it something close to something you knew, like Ethereum Max was the actual coin that we're talking about here.
Okay, it wasn't Pro.
No, but it's unassuming buyers and then people validating it from a celebrity. This is like a very clearly a pump and dump scheme. I went and looked it up last night. The average value of one of these was 0.0000008 cents. And so like that, like anyone who like spends a little bit of time in crypto, like that's a red flag of being like, hey, if the cost of each coin is super low and they're trying to pump this you can buy a lot. So it tricks you into saying, I can get a whole bunch. And as it goes up, I'll make a bunch of money.
It's a good smell test, right? So if you're looking at an IPO or a SPAC or something like that, and the exorbitant amount of marketing doesn't match the clear hold on market share or the availability and popularity of the product, then you know you're getting pumped and dumped, right? That should be a fucking red flag immediately for anybody that gets involved in any market. Well, unfortunately, most buyers out there right now are like you, which is to say they eat at Olive Garden.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They don't take risk with their diet. They're sure as shit not going to take risk with what money they have to invest in the market.
Correct. And it's because of exactly what Pomp said. And I feel like we're close enough and we're bros that I can call you Pomp since everybody calls you Pomp online. I want to be in that club now with you and call you Pomp like we're old school homies.
The only problem I have with you is you got a Falcon shirt on. We got to get you a Giant shirt. But other than that, we're good.
Giants, come on.
Giant. Joe Judge is out,
the last good press the Giants are going to get is when Eli fucking goes into the Hall of Fame, and that's it for them.
That's it. That's it. By the way, so the Falcons jersey, I mean the Falcons T-shirt, I can say why. We got into a debate on our sports show in one of the chat rooms about Georgia sports and did they blow their load? And yes, we did. The Braves won, the Bulldogs won the other night. Falcons not even close to the playoffs. So I'm going to wear it just to let them know. I'll still believe some year. It's just not this year, obviously. We're all done as Georgia sports fans. But besides Bitcoin and Ethereum, what do you tell your investors to trust in because there's a million coins out there?
Yeah, so I'm probably one of the most conservative people when it comes to this whole space, right? And if you were to look at the way that I invest, all the guys on Wall Street think I'm absolutely insane. Over 95% of my net worth or the kind of liquid portfolio is in Bitcoin, right? They're like, that is the craziest thing in the world. But then in the crypto world, they're all like, dude, that's the boomer coin. Like, that's not even the riskiest thing here, right? Like, I'm over here buying Ethereum Max or, whatever NFT or whatever. And I think what you have to remember is that, like, Bitcoin is trying to be a global store of value and a currency. A lot of the other things aren't trying to be that. So they're not actually competitive, right? It'd be like me saying to you, like, man, what do you like? Do you like the dollar? Do you like a barrel of oil here? Or do you like Amazon stock?
Right.
You're like, dude, those are like three different assets that have completely different things. I'm not trying to pick between, the dollar or oil and Amazon for the most part. If I'm looking at, say, stocks. So same thing with a lot of the cryptos is there's things that are trying to be currencies. There's things that are trying to be the equivalent of equities. There's things that are trying to be more like bonds, and there's more things trying to be commodities. And Bitcoin is trying to be a currency. Now, the reason why I'm personally so interested in it brings us back to kind of the Jack Dorsey comment, which is, if you really think about what the problem is in society, and this is like just sad shit, frankly, the wealth inequality gap in our country and globally is worse than it's ever been. Mm-hmm. And naturally what happens towards the later cycles of a society is everyone starts to condemn success. It's like the billionaires are evil, the corporations are price gouging, anyone who's successful, screw you, you don't deserve what you got. And it usually comes from either the politicians or it comes from people who are looking to lash out and complain about their own situation. But if you really boil down, why did over the last 24 months of this kind of pandemic / economic, shock, why did the rich get richer and the poor got poorer? It's not because Jeff Bezos took advantage of people, right? Jeff Bezos, they literally pay $20 an hour in many cases. The Amazon pays $15 an hour. He hired 500,000 people in the middle of, the highest unemployment the country's seen in literally decades. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that goes into it. And I'm not here to apologize for him. But what I know is that Jeff Bezos understands don't hold dollars. He holds equity and he invests. And so does every other rich person. And so when you break down society in the United States, 45% of Americans have no investments. They just hold dollars. They live paycheck to paycheck. They only hold dollars. Well, if the dollar is losing value, you're getting poorer and poorer as you go. And so while you're going down in your financial kind of situation, the rich people are benefiting from the devaluation of the dollar. They don't hold the dollars, they're holding real estate. Right. And real estate's going up because the dollar is going down. So rich people get richer because they hold assets. Poorer people are getting poorer because they're not holding assets. Right. And so that's not a wealth problem. That's an education problem. Well, that's literally rich people know what to do and other people don't. And so if they're not educated, they get screwed.
I would say it's more than an education problem, right? So over the last 2 years, we've experienced government overreach in a way that I haven't seen in my lifetime. And Joe and Susie Baker, with their little fucking bakery and deli, can't stay open. They can't fight the lawsuits. They don't have the legal expertise or capital to battle the government. So their business shuts down, and then Amazon opens a new bakery. So it's not just about. I mean, you're right about that, and that's the time value of money. I tell people about this all the time. Don't fucking. There's actually a joke about 30 Rock. Alec Baldwin's like, "What are you invested in?" And Tina Fey's like, "I've got $16,000 in my checking account." It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? That should not be the case. So yeah, it's two-pronged is all I'm saying. Government regulation is really fucking people up right now. But that's not an easy one. That's not Amazon's fault, and two, there's no real easy solution to that either, right?
Of course. And I think the other thing, too, to remember, though, is like, why is Amazon able to do that? It's because they have been a great capital allocator. They've invested their money and positioned themselves to do that. Now, Amazon isn't a huge monopoly. Like Shopify is a massive business that's been able to take a different approach, and they've reinvested their profits, and they've been able to grow very large. And so I think that ultimately what we're watching happen here is like Bitcoin and also the pandemic, the economic recession, all this stuff is giving people a crash course in money and economics and finance, and they're having to pay attention. But ultimately, I think what the average American, the number one thing they have to learn is that if you simply save, which your grandparents or your parents told you was the way to financial security, like that is no longer a viable path to actually becoming financially free or getting financial security. If you just live paycheck to paycheck, save a little bit of money, put it in the bank, like you're screwed. Right. You will actually be in a worse position in the future. And so I think that's where you're seeing all these young people, like all this like TikTok investor bullshit, whatever. It's like, it's probably the wrong like execution, but it's because the whole generation now is interested in this stuff because they're realizing I can't just save money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So you need to channel the excitement and the energy and all that stuff into like the actual intelligent, strategies, not have, some 22-year-old kid come and tell us all what stock to buy or what, crypto is going to go up fucking 5,000% in a day.
But all the intelligent strategies aren't super risky. Some of them are, but not all of them are. If you get paid X amount of dollars and you put $2,000 in savings a month, you would be better off putting that $2,000 into the mortgage in your home, overpaying on your mortgage than you would just putting it in a savings account. Right, unless it has a super high return, in which case it's probably not a savings account, right? I mean,
here's what I tell
really
everyone.
simple shit you can do to avoid exactly what you're talking about. That idea that your fucking money's just going to grow on its own. It doesn't work that way.
The richest people in the world, if you go look at the Forbes 400 list, there's no one that saved their way to the richest person in the world. There's also no one who day traded their way to become one of the richest people in the world. It's people who, over a long period of time, did the really unsexy shit. They either owned equity or they owned real estate for the most part. Like that's the two ways to get rich. Either own equity, and you can own equity in a business you create, or you can invest in the stock market.
And there's always the opportunity to do it with new technologies too. In the late 90s, the fucking tech boom, people were making some of our friends were making millions of dollars just squatting on fucking websites.
Yeah.
They didn't do any work. All they did was get on fucking whatever, I don't think it was GoDaddy, but whatever it was at the time. Like, all right, registering that one. People, the Buffalo Bills had to buy their shit from somebody.
It was two of our buddies, and like they're two of the richest people we know, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, what did you really do? And it was this one thing, I'm not going to say what it was, and I was like, that was it? And they figured it out before everybody else, and congratulations.
But now with technology, the beautiful thing about technology is everything scales now, right? It's not like you have to fucking open, let's go back to the bakery thing. You open a brick and mortar shop and you can sell to the people that fucking foot traffic by that bitch, and that's it forever. If you open something that's digital, the sky's the limit. As many eyeballs you can fucking get, and that entire thing belongs to you now, right? It's start a fucking business.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Well, it's also look for leverage, right? I think that's probably the biggest thing. Like, I've learned a ton from a guy named Naval Ravikant. And what he talks about is getting this leverage. And if you really think about it, there's a couple of forms of leverage. One is capital. So if you got money, you don't have to spend time, right? You can invest the capital and grow it. If you've got media, you guys have a podcast, you got an audience, you get leverage. And then you can also have employees. You can hire people, you can get leverage. And so there's a bunch of different forms of leverage, but ultimately that's exactly what I think the average person needs to understand. But we also have to remember, like, there's a lot of people who don't give a shit. They're like, dude, I don't want to run a business. I don't want to be an entrepreneur. I don't want that. I want to go to work and I simply want to do my job, go home, hang out with my family and be happy. And for those people, what they just have to understand is like, okay, you don't have to go try to be the richest person in the world. But what you do have to do is you have to be intelligent enough to protect your wealth by not just saving in dollars. Go buy the S&P 500. Probably the least risk thing that you can do in most people's eyes is just dollar cost average into the S&P 500. It's compounded at 8 to 10% every year for literally decades. And if you continue to do that, you're not going to get rich fast, but you will get rich over time. And the stat that I always tell people, which just blows folks' minds, is there's this guy, Dave Ramsey, who he does a survey. I think it's every couple of years. And he asks, what is the occupations of people who become millionaires? Guess what one of the top 5 occupations are?
Student?
Being a teacher. Being a teacher. And why a teacher? The teachers get paid on average like $50,000 a year. So every 20 years, the teachers get paid $1 million. How the hell do they become a millionaire? Right? Yeah. It's because they live within their means. I didn't have a single teacher growing up that was showing up in a Ferrari, that he leased. Right? Yeah. They all drove like, Honda Accord. They spent less than they made. They weren't trying to impress people. They didn't necessarily wear, $5,000 suits and have a Rolex on their wrist. And so ultimately they just had good kind of like core financial habits. And so, yeah, that's funny to laugh about because the teacher ends up being a millionaire and the guy who makes $200,000 a year doesn't end up being a millionaire, because guess who actually has a hard time being a millionaire in many cases? Physicians. Why? One, they end up graduating with immense amounts of debt. So they got to go pay off $300,000, $400,000 worth of debt. And then 2 is they show up to all their, kind of social events, and every doctor's got the newest car, the newest watch, the newest home, the vacation. And it's just like lifestyle creep. And so ultimately, like, how is it a teacher gets in a great position and a doctor ends up in debt? Like the earning power is so different. It's just financial habits. And like, that's a shitty thing that people don't want to hear because it requires discipline. But ultimately, that's how they end up getting to financial security.
Yeah, it really is. And like, it's cool to hear from people like you. But I'm also curious because of some of the programs you've been on. How I first heard about you was I was at a recent hospital stint. I was giving, it was a very generous thing. I was giving part of my penis to a needy man over in Asia. And it was a very long procedure, but I was in the hospital for many, many days, obviously, while they did this. No, it was something else unrelated. But I saw you on CNBC, actually. And you were doing an interview about Bitcoin going to 100 grand and everything else. Do you find when you do shows like that, because let's face it, you're one of the few guys that is allowed on mainstream TV that is allowed to talk about Bitcoin and everything else, because I feel like they're behind the cameras going, fuck this guy. We're here to talk about stocks and actual things that are going on. Now Bitcoin is eating up half of our screen on the bottom, right-hand corner. And it's like, well, I guess we got to talk about it. What's been your experience on these shows and trying to get people like us, our audience, or just normal people in the financial world to buy into crypto?
Yeah, so I think first, my goal isn't to necessarily buy people, get them to buy into crypto. I think that the key piece is I actually don't even really like talking about the solution, because if you just talk about the problem, then people immediately understand the solution, right? So actually the problem is more enjoyable for me to talk about. But on these shows, I've been doing it for a long time, and if you go back in 2018, Bitcoin crashed from about $20,000 down to $3,000. And, whether it was good or bad, I'd keep going on the show, and they would, they loved it. They were taking their little victory laps and being like, oh, it's down a ton. And I kept telling them, I said, that's okay. I've been buying the whole way, right? We're buying a bunch of it and all this stuff. And I think that really, when it's going down, it's easy to kind of celebrate and say it's over, right? And then when it's going up, it's like, oh, this is the top, whatever. What you end up finding is that they can't ignore it. And that's actually the thing that's changed, is because now when they bring people on to talk about it, guess what happens? A whole new demographic of digital natives that understand the internet, they start paying attention. Views go up, social media chatter goes up, and clicks to their website go up. Mm-hmm. So what do? If you're sitting there and you're looking at this, you're like, all right, are we really going to talk about the 10-year treasury yield? Or are we going to have some guys come on and say, hey, man, Bitcoin's literally the best performing asset over the last decade and bankers suck? Well, guess what? What's more entertaining, right? And so ultimately, I think that there's been some mainstream media just they can't ignore it. The other thing is, at the end of the day, you can I joke all the time, you can bark all you want, but it's what's the bite? And Bitcoin's been compounding at 170% annually for a decade. And so no matter what Bitcoiners say on the internet, at the end of the day, they just point to the scoreboard. And there's a lot of people who dismissed it for a long time. And Bitcoiners, which frankly were just retail investors across the world who took the time to learn about it, front ran Wall Street firms, corporations, nation states, treasuries, central banks, etc. And usually that works the opposite way, right? Usually it's the institutions get access and then retail gets access. But this time it worked backwards. And I think that there's this element of there's a lot of people who didn't like that, right? It's what do you mean that I spend all my time all year long focused on financial markets, trying to invest, and some idiot in his underwear in his basement literally bought an asset and outperformed me. And that was crazy. But guess what also happened? Last year, 3 major hedge funds beat the S&P 500. 3.
Yeah.
35 politicians at the national level beat the S&P 500.
Yeah.
It's funny. Dan just brought this up on the show 2 days ago. Yeah.
Crazy. And so guess who beat the politicians? Is retail people who just bought Bitcoin and chilled because it went up 65%, right?
Well, so that's different though. The politicians beat it because of insider trading that's legal for them, right? These other people did it because they're on top of new technology. And now, but now we're seeing most of the fucking crypto experts I follow now suggest that we're in a bear market. Google Trends show searches for specific terms like Bitcoin and Ethereum are the top 2 are down 70%. Searches for NFTs are way up, by the way. But I think a bearish market and something this new is almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. We saw it with Facebook when their IPO tanked. People that know what they're doing come in and buy that dip hard as fuck and then artificially send it like crazy back up. So everybody's panicking with Bitcoin. Oh, is it going to go down to 37,000? Maybe. But it'll be back up to fucking 70 by the middle of this year, probably.
Yeah, what's your prediction on it? Again, when I was in the hospital, I'm going to hold you to this. You said Bitcoin to 100 by the end of the year, my man. That did not come true.
Did not. No, it did not. Look, I think that the thing to remember about Bitcoin is in the last 2 years, it's dropped 50% twice, right? One time in 2020, it dropped 50% in a single day. It was scary as hell, right? And then last year, it dropped 50% over like a 3-4 week period. Last year in 2021, there was 7 different times where it dropped 20% from kind of the new all-time high back down below. That is immense volatility. And so in 2019, I had written a piece that said, hey, I think that by the end of 2021, Bitcoin will hit 100K. It was at $10,000. It didn't go to 100K, went to 70. And so ultimately we got a 7X, right? We didn't get a 10X. So yeah, I was wrong. But with that, I think what's going to end up happening is it will cross 100. We'll look back, I'll say the number wasn't wrong. It was just the time frame, right? So whatever that ends up happening, it happens. Now, what I do think is really important for people to understand is if you're trying to buy an asset and then you want to spend it tomorrow, you probably shouldn't buy the asset that can go up or down 10% in a single day. That's probably not what you should be doing. But you also have to remember that even though Bitcoin went down 7 different times, more than 20%, and one time over 50% last year, it still ended the year up 65%. So all that volatility, it still was up materially. The US dollar is guaranteed to lose purchasing power. It doesn't matter if it's fast or slow, but I guarantee it. Why? Because of the way that it's structured, they have to continue to debase it. And so I think that's where people are starting to understand, like, okay, maybe I don't want to put 100% of my wealth into Bitcoin or crypto or stock market or whatever, but I also can't have 100% in dollars either because I'm guaranteed to lose. So I have to start to actually be intelligent about, I need some kind of rainy day fund if I lose my job or, an unexpected expense or something like that. But other than that, I better be investing because if I'm not investing, I'm losing money. And so now it's become a thing where like it used to be risky to buy Bitcoin. Now it's actually more risky not to own Bitcoin.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that's only going to continue over time. And as that continues, guess what happens? Bitcoin goes up. That's the marketing campaign. When Bitcoin's price goes up, what does everyone in the studio do? They all start talking about it. Oh, shit, you see Bitcoin's up, 10, 15, 20%. And that's what ends up happening. Finally, you capitulate. You go and you buy some.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's what happens as you get global adoption.
And when we walk in and our employees are all smiling and laughing and giggling behind the scenes, I know that crypto is up for the day. I don't even have to look at the account. I know that it's up for the day. Right now, currently, and this is important for the audience, as we're pre-taping the show on Thursday. This airs Sunday night at 8 o'clock EST. Let's see.
Is it 42?
40, yeah, right around 43,000 for Bitcoin right now. Look, we're January 13th today. What do you predict by the end of the year for Bitcoin?
I don't know how high it can go or how low it can go. Here's what I do know is the 2 data points that I now spend way more time, right? 2-3 years ago, I was obsessed with the price. Where's the price going? Where's the price going? Now, frankly, it's just not that important to me because what I've now kind of come around to, and again, it goes back to kind of the Jack conversation of just like, I believe that Bitcoin specifically will do more positive impact on the world than all philanthropy combined, which sounds like an absolutely insane fucking statement.
Well, I want to hold you right there with that statement. So like you believe that Bitcoin will be the most utilized cryptocurrency and in the end beat out over everything else that's trying to be a currency like it via built on blockchain technology.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any stopping this in terms of the growth and the user base, et cetera. And the reason why I think that it will have the biggest positive impact is because if you think of the world's problems from a first principle standpoint, it all comes back to the money. So a great example is like, why is it that we have a wealth inequality gap? It's because the currency is debased and half of the population holds the currency rather than invest. Okay, how do you fix it? You can go try to educate them, or you literally can fix the money. How do you fix the money? You literally hand them an asset that nobody controls and nobody can debase. Now you've just fixed the wealth inequality gap to a degree. You're not going to fully solve it, but at least you've now moved it in the right direction, where it doesn't matter how rich you are, you have the same purchasing power protection regardless of who you are because you both hold the same asset.
Right. And no government can come in and stop that either. I think that's one of the points. I mean, I guess they could send armed people to take your fucking wallet. Right, but they still have to be able to get into it.
But here's the difference. Is let's say that somebody shows up to your house with a gun, right? And you got cash. If you don't tell them where it is, they just tie you up. They'll eventually find it.
Yeah.
Right. They just literally ransack your house till they find you. You got a safe band. We'll get into it eventually. Right. If you have the currency at a bank, they send a piece of paper to the bank and say, freeze their assets. We have a court order. They freeze your assets. Right. And those are extreme cases that the average person is not worried about. But that just illustrates kind of how sovereignty does and does not work in the legacy system. With Bitcoin, somebody could show up to your house with a gun and say, give me your Bitcoin. And no matter how much they ransack your house, they can't get it unless they have your seed phrase, kind of your password, if you will.
I mean, they can put you in a chair, they can hold an iPhone up to your face, and they can scan their QR code on their phone and send everything that you have in your exchange or your wallet on your phone to theirs.
If you have it in a centralized exchange, absolutely. Right. So this gets into kind of the point about the centralized versus self-sovereignty, if you will. If you just leave your Bitcoin sitting on Coinbase or in Gemini or BlockFi, Kraken, wherever, ultimately what you're doing is you're leaving yourself susceptible to that.
Well,
somebody has your
this is
username
exactly
and
what happened
password.
with Mt. Gox and a decentralized exchange, which decentralized exchanges are actually more heavily susceptible to being hacked and to all of these big issues with the crypto community that's causing a lot of these forks in these coins throughout the last 10 years or so. So like you preach that, but like those do get hacked. They get hacked quite often, and even the largest decentralized exchanges have come under fire.
So I don't think that it's a centralized versus decentralized exchange. I think that it's a question of centralized exchange versus cold storage.
Yeah. Okay, so you have a cold storage of a cold wallet, which is a USB, and I hold a gun to your head, and I plug the USB in, and I transfer your Bitcoin.
Like, but you still have to fucking torture me to get it, man.
Yeah.
You're not.
But you can still
resilience isn't about building an ultimate end-all protection to everything. It's about building layers of protection, and that's all you can really do. Right.
With everything in life
Yeah.
is build layers of protection. Because, I mean, you didn't even mention rape, which, look, if somebody threatened to rape me, like Giorgio would actually do that. He would be like, great, let's do it. And then even though he would just give you the money anyways, like he would want the rape. Yeah. Certain people will want certain different layers, and some people will.
We don't kink shame.
We don't kink shame on the show, and that's fine.
But I think another key piece to this is like I think it's Giorgio is talking about, like if somebody literally came in your house, put a gun to your head, right? Obviously, not a good situation. But I think a more kind of accurate depiction for the majority of people around the world is, let's say that you live in a country and you want to leave. I mean, how many stories do we know from history where people literally had their gold confiscated as they're trying to get on the train to get away from the Nazis, right? Or as they're trying to cross a border because they live in Venezuela and they're worried about their family safety, or somebody confiscating their wealth and somebody literally takes their money from them, right? Like that's the type of stuff where I think the average citizen says to himself, if I literally could store my wealth virtually and I don't have to worry about a centralized authority like an exchange, a bank, anything like that, being able to confiscate it. Again, I hope to God I never need to actually rely on that feature, but I have it if I need it, then that ends up being good. And it always brings me to the point of like, you always have like the one reply guy on the internet who's like, oh yeah, but if the internet goes down, then you can't access your money. And it's like, all right, dude, 93% of the legacy financial system is electronic money, not dollars. So you can't get your dollars either. And by the way, if the internet goes down, who the fuck cares about Bitcoin? You better have a gun.
Yeah.
That's like mass anarchy,
luckily,
right? Like
we've got quite a few.
We got quite a few around this studio.
I do have one last thing I want to talk about. We mentioned volatility. I think the volatility of the market over the fall is one of the reasons that crypto quote is down, whatever the fuck that means. It's not really how that works, but anyways, to me, it's like, and I've watched a lot of these IPOs. I've watched a lot of new tech and things like that develop over the years. It's kind of like blowing up a pool toy, right? You blow some air in there and a little bit leaks out. While you catch your breath, you blow some more in there and blah, blah, blah. And it keeps shrinking and expanding and shrinking and expanding until it reaches the general size that it's going to be, right? And without some kind of extreme external pressure, like a major stock, the company misses their fucking earnings by a lot, or one of their projects fails, or their CEO fucking does some weird shit to somebody or whatever the fuck. Typically speaking, it gets into a range that it's going to be in. And that means Bitcoin right now is not even close to its ceiling, which means if you want to just buy something and not think, if you're one of those people that wants to work 9 to 5, and not think about it, not own a business, not do anything, it's almost a security over the course of 20 years.
Yeah, and the weird thing is we've had enough people on the show, because we're on 5 days a week, that, most of our richest friends that have come on the show have all said off air, hey, what we do is just do a little bit in auto pay every Friday to Coinbase or whatever their app is, and it just takes it right out of your account, which is what I started doing last January. So I guess it's been a year now, and it just goes in, and you don't think about it. You don't think about it the same as you would with anything else. Except I can't do that in the stock market. I can do it in crypto, and I'm in the safe ones that I think that are safe, the same way as you. And I think that's the smart way to do it. Is that how you do it?
Yeah, so I think that the kind of idea of dollar cost averaging is frankly the only way to really think about Bitcoin. You can obviously make one-time larger purchases as you go, but really the way that I think about it is I'm converting bad money for good money, right? I'm converting the dollar, which is going to lose value if I hold it, and I'm converting it. And when you do that, there's a element of dollar cost averaging in any good asset is a good idea. So if you dollar cost average into real estate, if you dollar cost average into the S&P 500, or you dollar cost average into Bitcoin over long periods of time, that ends up being a really good decision. And the same reason why you have seen generational wealth generated by doing that is why Bitcoin is so attractive to people, right? Like I always use two examples. Think of the richest families in America. What do they own? They own real estate for the most part, right? Why do they own real estate? Because they simply are holding that hard asset that the dollar devalues against, real estate goes up, and they literally have tax benefits for doing it. They get cash flow, depreciation, and then they pass it on to their kids. And it's like a game, right? It's just like a real estate family is rich forever. Well, in India, what did those families do? They held gold. Why'd they hold gold? Because they kept acquiring more gold. And if you're the asshole in the family lineage that sold the gold, you were blacklisted and literally not invited to the family functions, etc. The same thing with the real estate families. What are they both doing? They're simply dollar cost averaging into a great asset and allowing the currency to devalue against it. And then they pass it on generation to generation. That's what Bitcoin is. It's just a digital version now. Now, rather than have the real estate and have to go over and fix the tenant's, toilet when they call and complain at 2:00 in the morning, now you can essentially own digital real estate to a degree, and you just hold it. You don't have to do shit other than just don't be an idiot when the price goes up and down, right? Don't be the person that FOMOs in at the top. Don't be the idiot that panic sells at the bottom. Just dollar cost average. Don't look at the price and literally turn around. And the number one psychological hack that I've come up with that has helped me a ton is I literally just said, you know what? The Bitcoin that I own, I'm handing to my kids and I'm handing to my grandkids. If I sell it, I'm stealing from them. And when you think of it that way, like it doesn't matter what happens to the price. I'm literally just going to hand it to them one day. And then all of a sudden, like, I don't care what happens to the price in the short term. If it goes down, maybe I buy a little bit more. But other than that, like, who cares? It's not mine. I'm holding it for them. And when you start thinking that way, I think one is you psychologically trick yourself into not being an idiot. But also two is it automatically creates that long-term thinking. And what we know is that people who think long-term have a competitive advantage over people who, are looking at the daily prices, trying to trade and do all this crazy shit.
Hey, Pom, this has been an interesting conversation, man. We're super amped that you were able to come on the show and give us some of your time today. I know you're a busy guy. We have this thing on the show at the end called the Drinkin' Bro of the Week, which is someone who has inspired you or helped you become the person you are today. Who would you like to give the Drinkin' Bro of the Week to?
Oh, my parents, by far. I think that I have a newborn child, and it's one of these things where I don't think anyone's ever ready to have a kid, right? So like you kind of just figure it out as you go. But the one thing that I think I've taken away from it is you forget, like, man, somebody wiped my ass.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like somebody helped me get here. And until you have a child, I don't think you quite appreciate it to the full extent. So definitely my parents, because I think that each one of us had somebody look out for us when we were younger and couldn't do shit. So I'd give it to them.
You gonna raise the baby in South Beach?
Yeah, not in South Beach. I'd be scared that the baby would end up trying to be like an exotic dancer or something if it grew up in South
or
Beach.
sell cocaine, yeah, one of the two.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being a DJ at Equinox down in South Beach. You know what I'm saying?
Is that what you moonlight as?
Yeah. No, when we were down there, I had some friends move there after college. It was a blast until it was not a blast anymore. Like, leaving the clubs at 6 a.m., eyes wide open, wink, wink. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's the stage I'm at now is, I have younger brothers, let them go live that life, and I'll live vicariously through them.
Exactly. You're the one that's saving for their kids' retirements. Pom, thanks for being on the show today. I'm going to keep saying Pom because I like it, and I think we're bros now. We're homies. We appreciate you being on today. For D'Anthony Holloway, I'm Ross Patterson. This is the Drinkin' Bros podcast. Good night, everyone.